Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the witch's wheel of the year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Welcome back, witches. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Spinning the Wheel podcast. What's our preamble before we get into stuff? We're in the midst of Lughnasadh season. We have another Sabbath coming up soon. We'll talk about that in just a second. But our very next class that's coming up is going to be Tarot Circle, which will be August 29th, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tarot Circle is a free workshop, community building resource / lecture hall that I host just about once a month for my patrons as a means of saying thank you to those folks. Anyone who is subscribed to my Patreon can join us for Tarot Circle. This month, we are going to be talking about working with reversals in tarot during retrograde seasons. I will have more information on that up for patrons and the link to the class soon, within a day or two. So that's what's up with that. Our next Sabbath that's coming up is Mabon, aka Fall Equinox. And that class is going to be a live stream on my YouTube channel that is free for all beings of Earth and any other planets or satellites that can get reception. I'm not broadcasting it purposefully, so it's up to you to be able to link up, but it's free for all. And folks that are subscribed to my Patreon at the Venus level and higher, that's $9 a month and higher, can get access to the workbook and the calendar, which is where we get a lot of our reference material for the podcast every week, plus the slides from the class and lots of other stuff that I don't necessarily share in the live stream. That's all available for those folks. Thank you so much to my patrons who support this work and make it possible. Woo! You guys are ridiculous, as I say every week. Because honestly, what is this? What are we doing? All right. That's that stuff. I also do tarot readings and astrology readings, so book a reading with me if you're into it. I'm around. You can find me on the internet, meganangus.com. Okay. This is Lughnasadh season, waxing half moon in Sagittarius, lunar week 21 by some lunar calendars. Let's get into this. So, first and foremost, let's ground into our major themes and work that we are doing as witches, pagans, heathens during Lughnasadh season, which lasts basically all of Leo season and all of Virgo season. We are focusing on themes of power, maturation, leadership, and production. And that can break down into stuff like competition, personal power, the fruits of our labor, leadership, strength, performance, taking the best of a harvest or of a circumstance, sacrifice, and wisdom. These are all themes that are going to come up for us during Lughnasadh season. So, where are we in that work this week? Well, tangent. Before I get into the stuff, we are going to break the week down in a different way again, just because it's been tickling my fancy to work with the information in different ways. Also, hi, Virgo season. Here's me with my moon in Virgo, like getting off on breaking down information in different ways. It's too meta. It's too meta. So what we're going to do is talk about the moons and the astrology, and then we're going to talk about the holy days this week, and then we'll get into our tarot and witchcraft to work with for the week. I hope that works for you, darling. And if it doesn't, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so we are starting off our lunar week Thursday, August 24th, 2023, 2:57 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day for everybody else around the planet, with a waxing half moon in Sagittarius at 1 degree. And this moon is not being aspected exactly by anything. So all of our aspects are a few degrees off, and we have stuff like a sextile to Pluto at 28 degrees of Capricorn, a sextile to Mars at 27 degrees of Virgo, and a square to Saturn retrograde at 4 degrees of Pisces. Um, so, this waxing half moon is hanging out with an interesting crowd, right? Pluto, Mars, and Saturn. Okay. Okay. And so, first and foremost, let's get into our collection of words that we have here. The waxing half moon. What are we doing with that? Well, this is the first major stop in the lunar cycle as we move from new moon to full moon to new moon. The waxing half moon is the first like major plateau that we hit. And at the waxing half, our little plant metaphor that we work with is that we have reached a branching phase, right? There's the main plant, and now it's starting to hang a hard right somewhere and branch off and do something perpendicular or different to the main flow of energy. And so, if we look in the sky and we think about what's happening with the moon, reflecting the sunlight, right? The moon and sun are square to each other at a waxing half. And at a waning half. We're going to have this square moment again on the other half of the lunar cycle. And this happens every month, twice a month, every month. Okay, so, oh no, a square. It's fine. It's a moment of adjustment. It can be a moment of friction. It can be a moment of decision making. Stuff is happening, and we need to adjust and adapt and think about what we're going to do with or about that stuff that's happening. So that's what we're doing with the waxing half moon. This waxing half moon is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign. Our mutable signs are all about adaptation, adjustment. So excellent. That's in line with each other. Everybody's on the same page here. We need to make some adjustments. Some stuff might need to end, or we might need to just get recalibrated, refocused, and push into whatever this new direction is. Sagittarius is a sign that is very philosophical, expansive in its thinking, open-minded, excited to reach the far horizon kind of vibes. Sagittarius also can be a little flaky, can be very dogmatic and righteous about things, and can be overzealous and in a religious, literal religious sense. It can also be overzealous in the sense of like taking on too much or assuming too much or saying yes to too many things. So at the outset here, our waxing half moon is saying wherever we are in our process, we need to check our enthusiasm a little bit. We need to check, do we have enough enthusiasm? Do we have too much enthusiasm? And specifically, enthusiasm that is about our faith, our spirit, our belief systems, um, our capacity to amp ourselves up and stay optimistic about stuff, slash our systems that are tied into, again, things like faith, spiritual practice, deities or entities that we might be working with, and things that we might expect from them or that we think they expect from us, etc., etc. Or in the worst case scenario, really getting hardcore about being dogmatic about our belief systems with the people around us, and is compromise something that's appropriate here, or is it appropriate to stick to our rigid thinking around stuff. That's really what's up with a waxing half moon in Sagittarius. I know it's a bit esoteric. We're starting out the week with like, what? Wait, what? And this is why I want to focus on, this is part of why I wanted to focus on the astrology and then talk about the holy days. So not only is that stuff going on, but while the moon is in this phase, it's hanging out with Pluto and Mars and Saturn. And that's a spicy combo. That's a spicy boy band of planets. Let's be very real right now. This is like that scene in the movie where everybody's drinking in the bar and there's the jukebox playing and people are laughing and like, glass breaks there's a dog or whatever. And then the biker gang shows up, the vampires show up, the like the the crew clad in black shows up. And it's Pluto and it's Mars and it's Saturn. Now, Pluto and Mars are the moon is sextile to Pluto and Mars, which means that it's a little bit more open to what they have to suggest. So there's that. And Pluto is the owner of the goth club, as I lovingly refer to that planet. Pluto wants to be spooky, wants to be investigative, has an air of death and rebirth, wants to plunge the depths of things, right? It's very casual. And Mars is impatient, excited, wants to get it done yesterday, wants to set it on fire, wants to argue and wrestle about it. Wants to have a good old dang time. That's what's up with Mars, right? So both of these planets are saying to this moon in Sagittarius, yeah, be weird, be frictious. It's right and good for you to be spooky in all of that philosophical stuff we were just talking about. Like optimistic, I don't think so. We're grim and it's going to be amazing. And then we also have a square from Saturn at 4 degrees of Pisces. And, a square from Saturn generally doesn't ever feel good. And squares between Saturn and the moon can bring about a real moody behavior or a moody feeling or just like very emo. So this moon might be very like rebel without a cause for you or the people that are around you. Or it might be sort of like a tossing and turning or like a fluctuation back and forth between feeling the push to be rebellious, and maybe rebellion isn't exactly the right word because that's something we might associate more with Uranus, but like the spookiness of Pluto or the investigative nature of Pluto, the probing nature, as well as like the impatience and the fieriness and the passion of Mars, versus the vibes of Saturn, which are like, stay calcified, stick to tradition, like play by the rules, all of that stuff. So this moon may present as like a very existential moment of, if only we were free, man, but like the man keeps us in their chains, And so, one of the medicines for this is really like pushing and feeling your yearning for a sense of what's going on out there. Um, and and following that, knowing that you can't know it all, knowing that you're never going to know everything that there is to know about human existence or about nature or about these wild political systems that are above our heads or whatever it is, like push for more knowledge and at the same time try to sit with the understanding of I will never know it all. And knowing that there may be um an antagonistic element to what you're doing, or an element that is like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Or an element that says, I'm willing to fight about this, or I'm willing to argue about this. It's also a lunar transit, so those things are going to pass relatively quickly. It might be a wild state of mind or a fun state of mind or a not so fun state of mind, or sense of vibes. but it's only lasting a few hours, so or like the day. Um, I mean, there may be some elements of it throughout the week, though, because we do have astrology, right? And it's going to speak to this stuff. But really, at the core of what we are doing and what we are working with this waxing half moon in Sagittarius is a seeking and a yearning for the truth. Where all that other stuff is coming in is the sextile from Pluto, the sextile to, or excuse me, the sextile to Pluto, the sextile to Mars, and the square to Saturn. So, your mileage may vary, but if you are unexplicably moved to wear a leather jacket this week, now you know why. Okay. For our lunar body work, when we are working with a waxing half moon in Sagittarius, we are awakening, activating, adorning, stimulating, and preparing for action the lower back, the sciatic nerve family, and the thighs. As I say every single week, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of the cauldron and bubble she do. But I don't know jack shit about what is appropriate for your healthcare system. I'm just a lady on the internet. So check in with your trusted health advisor about incorporating the lunar body information, and also we can always work with the metaphor. So is there something you need to get off your back? Is there something that's making your hips sway? Is there something that's getting on your nerves? All of that may be appropriate here too. Okay. For our plant body work, we are harvesting. Of course, we are in the great season of harvest, Lughnasadh, Mabon, and Samhain. So currently we are harvesting for drying and storage. We are doing pest control and disease control. We are plowing, weeding, pruning to encourage above ground growth. If we're planting anything, we're planting annuals that yield above ground, like viney crops, in particular beans, peas, melons, squash, tomatoes, peppers, and then also, of course, our cereals, our grains, hay, garlic, cucumbers. Also, a great time for taking cuttings, doing grafting, and as I already mentioned, harvesting above ground for drying and storage in particular. We'll talk. I think I have it mentioned in the witchcraft section, but I'll say it here too. Great week for saving seeds. Great week for harvesting seeds and saving them for later adventures. Okay, so that is our moon stuff, right? So what do we have going on for the astrology of this day? Well, we have Mars in Virgo, trine Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 28 degrees. Oh, right. Yeah, that's what we were just. So, and I wanted to speak. I wanted to speak about these together and separately because, again, the lunar transit is super quick and it kind of lights up that there is this longer conversation happening between Mars and Pluto. I expect that you'll probably feel that like the 23rd, the 24th, the 25th, because Mars is a slower moving planet than the moon is. So, what do we get with a Mars trine Pluto? Well, we can get a lot of that, leather jacket vibe, right? Black leather jacket, man. But which, hey, who doesn't need a little rock and roll in their life, right? Enjoy. But when these two planets get together and actually get, respectfully get their shit together, this is a really dope transit for reform, oddly enough, reform. It's a really great transit for looking at your long-term plans. Now, again, these two planets, when they hang out together, can get real spicy, and it definitely is two planets those that are like those two friends that are constantly like egging each other on and riling each other up to do stupid shit, and then you end up with a show like Jackass. That's Mars and Pluto, like uh, but it doesn't have to be that kind of energy, and if we can wrangle these two planets again, it can be an opportunity for incredible reform. It can be an opportunity for really getting a good look at what your long-term plans are. Um, Now, they do want to stir shit up. They do want to muck with stuff. And we have to also remember that just a day ago, Mercury stationed retrograde and the moon or excuse me, the sun has just moved into Virgo. So Virgo is very much a sign that is dedicated to getting down to the nitpicky, granular, nitty gritty of things. It wants to get down to the atomic level of stuff and organize and fuss with and all that. And Mercury is stationing retrograde in Virgo, where it is not only a planetary ruler, but it is also exalted. And so Mercury also is like, hell yeah, let's get down on the tiny details and let's unweave this whole thing and redo it and. And so Mars and Pluto together absolutely can be a very large motorcycle roaring down the highway, right? It can be that kind of energy that's like, well, we are not wrangling that. That is just going off. Okay, cool. But if we can wrangle it, it can lend tremendous power to that nuanced work that the Sun and Mercury both want to engage in. And it can remind us as we are doing that very nuanced work to keep the broader picture in mind. Where Virgo can have a shortcoming is that it can really get lost in the details and it can forget the bigger picture, the larger pattern, that time moves, right? It's like, no, 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 I'm alphabetizing the silverware drawer and I don't care if it takes me all week, but it's going to be perfect. And everybody else is like, okay. But also, no, everybody stay out of the kitchen. Like, but we need to eat. I said no. Virgos, I see you. You are seen. I witness you. Uh, you know. So so this could be really dope energy, right? Again, at least it's a trine. It's intense. It wants to stir shit up. And with our retrogrades and all that stuff, there is also that tendency of like digging in the dirt and like what is here, opening up all the drawers. And so now there's an opportunity to organize the mess we have found, or to throw some stuff out, or to air some things out. And we have the drive and the initiative to want to do it and to get it done. The one thing I will say about it is this, though. When we are looking at those long range plans and we're making the adjustments that need to be made, we need to keep in mind the community, the group. And I'm always hammering on that, but in this transit in particular, Mars is a planet that's about ourselves. It's very concentrated on I, me, mine. That's its job. That's what it represents. But in this, there can be a real like narrowing of our viewpoint, and we can become really myopic and just be super concentrated on this is what I want for my success and my achievement in my long-term plan. And we will do well because Pluto is involved. We will do very well to make sure that we are including what does the group need, what's the long-term benefit for the community at large or the systems at large that I'm working within. Where do I need to stay connected, and where is it appropriate for me, right? And that's something that's in Lughnasadh season as well, is I've been given this power to share with all these folks around me. So this is another reminder of that work too. Okay. So that then brings us to Friday the 25th, where we have no astrology whatsoever. Saturday the 26th, we have the moon moving into Capricorn, but otherwise nothing. And then Sunday the 27th, we have at 2:18 p.m. a gibbous moon in Capricorn at 19 degrees. So interesting that our moon has moved into Capricorn, because also on this day we have the sun in Virgo opposing Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 3 degrees, almost 4 degrees. Oh no, a sun opposed Saturn. Okay, all right. So interesting that we have our gibbous moon in Capricorn and we're having the sun opposed Saturn on the same day. Saturn being the ruling planet of Capricorn. That's not always going to happen. So that's really special timing for us, in my opinion, especially because the sun has just moved into an earth sign. Remember, Jupiter and Uranus are both hanging out in Taurus, also an earth sign. So earth signs, last week I was checking in with you. I know you're going through it. We all know that you're going through it. It's real obvious, hun. Just let us help you. You're not fooling anyone. But this could be a week where it feels like simultaneously you're in the spotlight, which I know is not your favorite, but also some of you it is, let's be real. But also, you might be feeling a little squeeze and some assistance at the same time. I think that this moon is actually really helpful, even though I'm about to say it is square Chiron, 19 degrees of Aries. It's also trine Mercury retrograde at 21 degrees of Virgo. So let's talk about all of this stuff. First off, it's a gibbous moon, and this is our last lunar phase before the full moon. So we're going to have a full moon next week. It's a fancy full moon. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later in the podcast. But a gibbous moon is almost full. Not quite, but almost. And this is the point in our metaphor where the branch has turned into a vine, and the vine is beginning to pick up momentum and spiral around the architecture and is like, no, let's make some stuff happen. Let's do things. Let's produce stuff. Let's be a plan, and let's have an action, and let's go. And again, really, really lovely, because Capricorn is our cardinal earth sign, right? So it's the earth sign that maybe wants to do it slowly, maybe wants to do it quickly, maybe is, going to be more patient than other signs are, but is still like, let's get something really started on the material plane for real, for real. Let's do that. And the gibbous moon is like, yes, I am about to produce. It's about to manifest. It's about to be time. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to walk out and find a pot of gold or anything like that. But the gibbous moon in our lunar cycle is always a great spot for us to think about what types of results are we going to be seeing next week and through the next 10 days or so of our lunar process. Like, what is going to be coming to a head, what's going to be coming to fruition, all of that stuff. And again, this is in Capricorn. So a sign that wants to materialize the realness in the real world, like wants to make real things really happen, and can be patient about that. Now, this moon, as I said, is square Chiron retrograde, 19 degrees of Aries, and is also trine Mercury retrograde at 21 degrees of Virgo. So first off, yes, this gibbous moon is looking into the past a little bit, or is thinking about the past, influenced by the past, to an extent. That's going to always sort of be true about any situation that's influenced by Saturn, Capricorn Saturn. So there is that. But again, at the same time, we have the sun in Virgo oppose Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 3 degrees. So, okay. When we are working with our gibbous moon in Capricorn, the number one subject matter that's coming up for us is, in what ways is our work for the group, for community, for society at large, for whatever? In what ways is our work for the group? And how are we being compensated by the group for that work? So, let's say you're the village ironsmith, right? Does the village need an ironsmith? Yes. Do you need a paycheck every week? Yes. Okay, great. But is that actually an equal exchange? Or are you the ironsmith that will wake up in the middle of the night when, somebody's horseshoe breaks and they are having a terrible time walking around and the horse is in pain and we need to fix this right now. Yes, I'll wake up and fire up the forge and make this happen in a few hours. We won't make the horse suffer. Or are you the ironsmith that's like, my hours are clearly posted on the door, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Don't look at me or talk to me otherwise. And either one of those is fine. I have zero judgment about that. But um but why I bring up those two examples of the type of ironsmith we could be in our little metaphor here is because one person is going above and beyond and one person is having very clear energetic boundaries. And when we are trying to figure out how to be compensated for the work that we're doing, sometimes we don't look at all of the work that we are doing. And sometimes we are coming at it from a situation of, I've been burned before, and I'm going to have very hard boundaries around whatever this situation is. You're pulling one over on me, sucker. And so either way, it's a little extreme, right? Like either we our boundaries are a little too loose, or our boundaries maybe are a little too firm. So in this moon, the personal work that's being asked of us is to kind of sit back and look at what is the work that I provide for community? Am I really getting paid back for that? Am I allowing people to pay me back for that or give me equal exchange? Um, am I giving too much or am I expecting them to not give me enough? And at the same time, there is a meta conversation here around what is the value of what you do. How valuable is it to the people around you? How valuable is it to society at large? And because there is a square from Chiron, there might be a lot of personal wound stuff that comes up in that moment of, how do I value my work? How do I value my efforts? And the square from Chiron might really encourage a painful way of looking of that, of thinking that we are not worthy, or thinking about all the times we have been told that we're not worthy, and how much of a defense or how much in the other direction do we swing because of those past experiences, etc., etc. Now, that's what Chiron represents in our process, is like the ouchy stuff from the past. And how that ouchy stuff affects how we deal with things now or don't deal with things. And then we also have a trine from Mercury RX 21 Virgo, which I think is actually helpful if we can get past that some of this is going to be painful potentially for us. The retrograde Mercury trine, I think, is really helpful for saying, no, but really, let's go back and think about this. Let's go back and review those conversations. Let's go back and really think about the literal words that were said. And how do I feel about those words? How has that affected me? And, or if it's not simply just going back over and thinking about memories and, combing through that for information, this is, along with that Mars trine Pluto situation that's happening 2-3 days before, sort of a continuation of a great opportunity to continue to review the plan, continue to review the process, to continue to refine and reorganize what you're doing and how you're doing it, which is the majority of Virgo season anyways. Okay. And we have the sun in Virgo opposing Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 3 degrees. So, this can feel like disillusionment. This can feel like limitations. There might be dad stuff that comes up. There might be dad karma stuff that comes up for you on a day like this. It's Saturn. It's totally here to like make it weird. There might be karma stuff that comes up with leaders and people that have been in patriarchal positions of power. Okay. So, and all of that said, um, in whatever difficult news comes through, or really what is more likely to happen is a sense of isolation or a sense of alienation and a sense of feeling like there is this vast chasm between you and everybody else. And like they're over there, you're over here, and they can't hear me. And in fact, literal communication may be difficult on this day. It's exact on the 27th, but it might even be the 26th, 27th, and 28th that we have this. That literal communication may be difficult. It may be difficult to find the words, but like your phone may not actually work. That kind of stuff. But here's the terrible part. Here's the absolute worst part. We're gonna get a Sun opposed Saturn once a year. And we might get more of them depending on what's happening with Saturn's retrograde process. But generally speaking, we're going to get a Sun opposed Saturn once a year. So we know that this is a moment in our process where we're going to have to check in no matter what. This is the thing with this particular opposition. We have to bridge the gap. We have to say our needs out loud to the people that we have reasonable expectations for answering back. Okay? So if we're yelling into the void, that's not reasonable expectation. If I'm telling my followers on social media, that's not reasonable expectation necessarily. Am I avoiding telling my close friends or my family members who I know I can trust and reach out to exacerbate my feelings of alienation? Yes, I'm calling you out, and you is me. Okay. Uh, but this is what's up with this opposition. We have to voice our needs. We have to say it out loud. We have to allow those people, again, that we have a reasonable expectation of. We have to allow those folks to help us. And also, we need to be listening for them to be voicing their needs, and we need to be listening to their limitations. We need to be listening to their limitations to see if they need something we have to share. That can help break the spell of alienation and isolation. We also need to be listening to their limitations to understand that even when we voice our needs, sometimes our people can't help us with our needs because they are lacking in that place too. And if we're not listening, we may catalog that as they don't care, they don't love me anymore, I'm isolated from that friend group, I'm alienated from those people, I reached out, they didn't answer, rather than thinking to ourselves, wait, there might be a reason other than me that they have not answered my call, my need. And so listening back for the response from people is very, very important on this transit. The transit is going to pass. The sun is going to move on. It's not going to last all week. At the same time as all of this stuff, we also have Mars moving into Libra. Mars is going to be in Libra from August 27th all the way through October 11th. So, in the midst of all of this kind of doom and gloom, and how do we get around the alienation vibes, let's talk about Mars in Libra, who does want to hang out. But before that, how about an ad? Okay. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you a bajillion billion times. See, the sirens are going off even as I say it. Thank you so much to my patrons. You guys don't even know. You don't even know. Thank you so much. You can sub for as little as $1 if you just think this podcast is dope and you want to support it. I don't run ads on the podcast, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I won't get paid even if I do. So screw them, man. You can sub, as I said, for as little as $1 or $5, even if you want to just support the podcast. And this is plenty of information. But if you want even more information, extra podcasts, extra videos, extra information about the Wheel of the Year, magical practices, tarot, etc., subbing at the higher levels, you get all kinds of cool free stuff. And at the even higher levels, you get free readings every month with me to be able to integrate all of this information into your personal life based on what's going on in your natal chart and all of that other good stuff. Join and change your life forever. Or, whatever. Thanks so much for the support. If you can't support financially, I completely understand, because life sucks on Earth right now. It's too expensive for everything. Tell a friend, share it on social media, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling especially hedonistic, you can leave a rating or a review. All right, that's the end of the ad. Let's get back to the podcast. Okay, so Mars in Libra. What's up with that? Mars is not the comfiest in the sign of Libra. Mars is actually in its detriment in this sign, and that's partly because Mars is the planetary ruler of Aries, and Aries and Libra are naturally opposing signs. So, Mars is like, ugh. I don't necessarily do it the way you do it, man. What is this? So, what do we have with this, right? Mars is a planet that's very, again, centered on the self, I, me, mine. And again, that's Mars's job to do that. Passionate, impatient, ready to fight, wrestle, argue about stuff. Wants to get there yesterday. Wants to be first, sometimes wants to be only. Libra energy is very focused on diplomacy, harmony, beauty, is very focused on the group mind and what is going to work for the partnership. And it's very we, us energy. Libra is very focused on how do we want to do something? What do we want to eat tonight for dinner? And to the point where, and again, this is what Libra represents. All of us have Libra in our chart somewhere. So all of us have this somewhere in our chart. Libra can be compromising to the point of kind of obliterating itself. And Libra can be compromising to an extent that it begins to expect that level of compromise from everybody else in the partnership and can get really resentful when that thing is not answered back. So, there's easy stuff and hard stuff, good stuff, bad stuff about both of these entities. Mars is very focused on the self and what do I need, and Libra is very focused on what do we need, what is good for the partnership, what's good for the situation. So you can see how these two are not exactly on the same page. Generally speaking, though, beside all that stuff, it can be pleasant when Mars is in Libra. There is an extra emphasis on making friends, socializing, going to parties, being seen in social settings. That extra energy can turn into being a little aggressive about it. So there's that. We want to socialize and be flirty, and then it's Mars energy, right? So Mars energy can be a little aggressive about that, a little overbearing. I need to be first. I'm going to talk the loudest in the circle because I want person X to pay attention to me. It can be a little much. It can be a little much. So all of us might be expressing some of that in the next couple of weeks while Mars is hanging out, or next few months, really, while Mars is hanging out in Libra. Our sense of fairness might be really deeply emphasized, again, to the point of like, it has to be fair for everybody or we're getting our heads cut off. There can be a difficulty in being decisive around things. Like Mars just wants to be done with it, and Libra is like, but I need to take into consideration every possible outcome and every possible person who could possibly be affected by this, and I just want it to be fair and balanced and just like really representative of everyone who's involved. And Mars is like, oh my god, just pick something and go. So there's that thing. And that can be inner conflict as well as external conflict. That could be stuff, that could be an argument you're having with yourself, or that could be things that you witness in the world where like two people cannot make a decision. Um, and you know, that's really going to kind of come down to like the core of those types of arguments are going to kind of come down to like independence versus supporting the collective. Your energy levels may fluctuate as well when Mars is hanging out in Libra, and we may be fired up and ready to go at sometimes and feeling rather like laid back and almost even passive some of the time. Um, it can be a great season for initiating romantic or sexy time relationships with folks, but don't expect them to last too long. There also might be a thing in you that you're like more all about the 4 a.m. conversation than the 4 a.m. boot knocking. And like, you know, not to say that like you completely shut it down on the sex level, but having the dialogue and having the exchange with a person might actually be more enticing than having sex with them or sensual contact with them. So you may see this kind of play out in a couple of different ways. So that's what's up with that whole day. The Mars piece is going to last a lot longer than everything else that we've been talking about for Sunday, August 27th. So in general, this process may start out with um, really having this moment of like, I need to kind of think about myself versus other people. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling a little isolated from other folks. Um, I'm doing this work and they don't see what I'm worth. And then Mars stepping into Libra is like, yeah, no, maybe we should go hang out and engage in some conversations and really listen to people when they respond back. And try not to be too impatient about reaching a conclusion or a decision on anything, but you know, go talk to the people and see what they have to say and listen to the people and see how they react to what I'm saying, and see if I can't get my goods and my services out there into the real world and push some of my passion into producing things that the group needs, and also allowing the group to support me in the ways that I deserve to be supported and that they can support me. That's how I'm seeing all of this stuff work together. Your mileage may vary. Report back. Let me know. For our lunar body work with the gibbous moon in Capricorn, we are awakening, activating, adorning, stimulating, and preparing for action. Our bones, our hair, our nails, our teeth. And for our plant body work, while the moon is in Capricorn, we are maintaining our containers, our borders, our fences, our beds, our structures. Like maybe you have a plant container that's starting to fall apart. This is a great time to maintain that and work on it. It's a Sunday, perfect. You know, or maybe something needs to be transplanted. Probably a good time for that because it's bursting out of its container. All of that kind of stuff. Planting and attending to our roots and our tubers, harvesting seeds and roots to replant versus the stuff that we were harvesting to dry at the beginning of the week. Great week for fertilizing, or a great time for fertilizing. And if we're planting anything, we want to plant annuals that yield above ground, especially our viney crops, as mentioned before: peas, beans, melons, squash, tomatoes, peppers, cereals, grains, hay, garlic, cucumbers. And this is a good time for taking cuttings, grafting, and again, harvesting above ground for drying and storage. Okay. So, the other thing that I wanted to say about the Sun oppose Saturn is that while Saturn is in this place in its orbit, it is as close as it's going to get to Earth for a while. Uh, it's at peak brightness, and the best time to see Saturn is from sunset to sunrise wherever you are. You can use one of those little star finders to find Saturn in the sky, but you may be able to see it with the naked eye depending on how much light pollution you do or don't have where you live. So at its brightest point, might be interesting to go out and actually meditate with the planet. Like, this is a character who kind of lurks in the shadows. This is a planet that kind of represents the spooky edge of the unknown and limitations and boundaries and all of that stuff. And yet it represents these really important wisdom lessons and maturing processes, and wisdom and maturation is such a big deal during Lunasa season. That it might, even though this is a day where it might feel tough, this might be ultimately a very healing transit for everybody to engage in. Okay. Our last little bit of astrology that we have for this week, it ain't too much. Monday, August 28th, Uranus stations retrograde at 23 degrees of Taurus, and it is going to stay retrograde through January 24th of 2024. Pretty normal. Those outer planets spend 5-6 months of the year in retrograde. So the fact that it is retrograde versus direct, we don't care about that part too much. But these days when the planets change direction or appear to change direction, we do want to take a little bit of a note of that and go, oh yeah, that is happening. That's a thing. What does Uranus represent for us? It's basically our unique individuality, and it is our capacity to liberate ourselves from past limitations. Very interesting piece of astrology, given everything else we've talked about in the week, to kind of wrap up the week before we go into our full moon. So, Uranus stationing retrograde here is like, where am I in my process of liberating myself from the past and from limitations born out of the past? Where am I in my process of, understanding what Saturn has to teach me and moving past what Saturn has taught me? Some of our words that we work with for Aquarius: illuminator, liberator, rebellion, revolutionary, suddenness, revelation, originality, genius, eccentricity, nonconformity, erraticness, originality, the anomalous, the unorthodox. So where is that stuff in your world? Check on your natal chart and look at where Uranus is in your chart. It's been there for a while, probably. It's probably going to be there for a while. Uranus spends 8-ish years in every sign that it travels through. So whatever house it's in, maybe it just got there, maybe it's just leaving, whatever. But, look at the house. This might be a place where you have some sudden shakeups, some changes, or some surprises that come out of left field. And in what ways is this sort of reminding you about attending to your own expression of uniqueness and individuality, your own sort of futuristic and revolutionary ideas, your own genius and capacity to invent and create in the world. Just that stuff. No big deal, right? And it's going to be in retrograde, or it's stationed retrograde through January of next year. So this is not something you got to figure out in a weekend. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So that is our astrology for the whole week. That's it. We've got our moon phases, we've got these couple transits, and we've got Mars entering Libra, and we've got Uranus stationing retrograde, and that is all of the astrology for this week. As I've said in the last couple of weeks, August and September both have very few transits. So the transits that we are experiencing collectively might feel a little louder than usual, just because they're the only ones that are doing stuff. So you may notice this more in more obvious ways in your life or in the world around you. Journal about it, dude. Okay. So now we are going to go into the holy days of this week, our themes are we've got a lot of different themes, so we are not going to get too hardcore in talking about any particular holy day. There is one that I'm going to go in on a little bit, but um going through and thinking about the themes that we are working with in this last half of Lughnasadh season, right? We talked about that stuff at the beginning of the podcast. Um, Power, maturation, wisdom, taking the best, sacrifice, things along those lines. And we know that like funerary games are a really big deal. I know a lot of folks that listen to this podcast also work with the incredible witch down south, Kook Teflon, and she has been taking y'all through lots of death games and funerary games over the last month. In alignment with the Taltian funerary games that Lu, the god Lu, holds for his foster mother, who passes away at this time of year. And so, ta-da, we have Lughnasadh or Lughnasadh. And lots of other cultures around the planet doing stuff for the dead and for ancestors, etc. And so we still have more of that this week. But we have we have a variety plate of of Lughnasadh festivals this week, and so it's really one of those weeks that's like, demonstrative of how uh, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Um, we don't necessarily have to celebrate the Sabbath on one day or one particular day, and in fact, the Sabbats may be a hell of a lot more complex than we initially understand them to be. And it might be really appropriate for us to celebrate the Sabbats over a period of time so that we can explore the many facets of those Sabbats. So this is one of those weeks that has that kaleidoscopic element to it, and we get to see how all of this stuff kind of comes together. As an aside, we have no heliacal risings this week, which I thought was very interesting, especially given the collection of heliacal risings that we had last week and the week before, right? Like we had some potent stars in the sky bringing some pretty intense symbolism. And this week it's just like, shh. Nothing, nothing. So, okay. Looking through the week, let me get my dates up. Here we go. Looking through the week. First off, we have harvest festivals and festivals celebrating the bounty pretty much every single day of this week, running from August 24th to 27th from our Yoruba friends and our Yoruba friends and ancestors. We have the Nui Afia Oko Yam Festival, and this is the festival of the new yam, and it is very straightforward. A harvest festival celebrating the abundance of the yam crops that are coming in. From our Seneca friends and ancestors, we have Gindandawa, which is a Thanksgiving and harvest festival and a festival of lights. Makes sense because we have the Perseid meteor showers happening overhead at the same time. And that's something that I have said in the past few weeks, but I don't think I said it enough. Any of the portions of the year where we are having big, strong, consistent meteor showers, especially meteor showers that have been repeating for thousands of years, we often have a lot of ancestor holidays at the same time, or ancestor festivals at the same time. From our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Varalakshmi, Vitram, and Karam Puja. Both of these are festivals dedicated to the harvest and to the bounty. Varalakshmi, in particular, dedicated to the goddess Lakshmi, who is a bounty and abundance goddess. From some of our Norse friends and ancestors, we have a harvest festival this week. And from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Epilum Jovis for Jove or Jove, Juno, and Minerva. And this festival is part of a festival complex that takes place at this time of year. We're going to talk more about it in just a second. So one of the other things that is emphasized in Lughnasadh season is power, and sometimes literally power for the sake of power. So we see from our Egyptian friends and ancestors the festival of the drunkenness of Hathor Sekhmet. And this is a pretty cool and interesting myth that I know from Egyptian mythology. And it is about it's sort of a teaching story about the power of Sekhmet. Sekhmet is a lion-headed goddess that is an iteration of the sun and Ra, also an iteration of Hathor, or Hathor is an iteration of her. It gets a little blurry there. And Sekhmet represents the intensity and the power of the sun, the majesty of the sun, but also the brutality of the sun. And in this particular myth, uh, that is within the festival of drunkenness, Hathor is going on a rampage, and it has brought drought to the land, and is just like blazing hot, cooking the Egyptian desert and cooking people. And everybody's like, oh my God, she's out of control. What do we do? And they all know that she has a thirst for blood, right? As you do as a lion headed goddess who is an embodiment of the sun in its most powerful aspect. You know, what are you going to do? And so a bunch of the priests get together and are like, you know what we do? We need to line the horizon with thousands and thousands of barrels of beer, and we will dye the beer red with pomegranate juice. And when she rises in the morning, it's going to be the first thing that she sees. She's going to chug all this beer and pass out and calm down. And that's what they do. And that's what she does. She rises in the morning, all rared to go, cook more humans. Wait, what is this? Buckets of blood for me? And she chugs down these thousands and thousands of barrels of beer and passes out and calms down. So this is a festival that's sort of witnessing the strength and the power and the majesty of this goddess and this entity, and then also an appeasement there of like, could you please calm down, please? could you please dial it back? From our Ogun, or excuse me, from our Yoruba friends and ancestors, we have the Ogun festival. Ogun is a warrior and a powerful spirit of metalwork, believed by the Yoruba to be the first god to arrive on Earth. Also, we have Wepwawet, which is from our Egyptian friends and ancestors. And this is the festival of proceeding from the front or going out at the head. And that's going to connect us to something else interesting. But it's that sort of the power going forth, basically. And then from our Orthodox Catholic or Eastern Orthodox Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Assumption of Mary, which is the moment that Mary is brought up into heaven and recognized as a super fancy deity and a very powerful entity and the mother of God and all of that cool stuff. Okay. So, another collection of festivals that we see this week are dedicated to the dead and to funeral work. On August 24th, from our Etruscan friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Mania or the Manes. And these were the dead basically come back to life, and entities that represented the restless dead, the unnamed dead, and also in a very interesting way, it also represented like people's unrequited thoughts about the dead or unrequited feelings about the dead. And so it was at in equal measure a moment of appeasing the dead, as well as opposing or appeasing the things in us that were like unsettled about those who had died. Also, during this week, what day is this? The August 26th, we have the Hacker Festival from our Egyptian friends and ancestors, and there are processions and feasts for Osiris and Anubis, who, of course, both are deeply connected to the dead. And Hacker or Hakar, on that night, the dead were counted. The ancestors were reckoned with, and dancing occurred. This was the night of sleep, or the sleep of battling Horus. And basically was this like appeasement of the dead kind of moment for ancient Egyptians. And also this week, we have on, what day is it? It is the August 27th. We have the Dies Natalis for the Temple of Asclepius from our Roman friends and ancestors. Asclepius was a healer, but also known for raising the dead. Okay. Moving to our next chunk of stuff. We have now more things, in my opinion, that bring us into the Virgo vibes of Lughnasadh season. I know, lenses on lenses, but stick with me. So when we move into the Virgo portion of Lughnasadh season, or Lughnasadh season, Lammas season, um, it's where we really start to begin to see the actual oncoming ending of summer. These are the last 4 weeks of summer. And so our characters like Crom Dub start to step forward a bit. And so in this week, from our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have a feast for St. Bartholomew. And from our Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox Catholic friends, we have the beheading of St. John the Baptist. One of the things that we see about the sacrificial deaths that happen during Lughnasadh season or Lughnasadh season are that many of them are a blow to the face, to the eyes, to the head, to the neck. It is always something about the head, right? And it's the top of the thing, the figurehead, the leader, the top point of it. The symbolism is very straightforward there. And so the beheading of St. John taking place at this time of year is very potent. Our Catholic friends and ancestors recognized this happening 2 weeks ago. Orthodox Catholic folks have it placed just after the sun moves into Virgo. And the Feast of St. Bartholomew, Bartholomew is another character that is beheaded. And so very interesting that their holy day is at this time of year. And so that entity, that energy, brings us into another collection of festivals that are happening this week, which is festivals that are dedicated to magicians, focused on magic users. Whoa, how does that? Virgo is connected to the tarot card, the Hermit. The Hermit is certainly a type of magical character, but the ruling planet of Virgo is Mercury, and Mercury is connected to the Magician card. Many sources of esoteric astrology see Virgo as a hermetic figure, even potentially connecting Virgo to Hermes Trismegistus, but also this energy of the magician and the magic user, the wielder of the information, the person or the being who is the living embodiment of the wisdom that spring and summer kind of deliver us. And through their integration of all that information, they are able to produce this wild ass harvest on the physical plane that we will be celebrating even more so at Mabon season, which is where Virgo turns into Libra. We'll talk more about that symbolism in the upcoming Mabon class. And so I always pay attention to what festivals might be coming up during Virgo season that point to magical practice or magical myths, entities, deities, whatever. And again, don't forget, we just had Mercury station retrograde in Virgo. So very interesting that we would have this collection of stuff in this week. From our Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the Feast for Osiris and the Triumph of Thoth. Thoth is where we get the word thought from. So this is an entity that is very dedicated to the mind, magical workings, magical thinking, all of that stuff. From some of our Norse friends and ancestors, we have a festival dedicated to Odin receiving his knowledge. And Odin receives that knowledge after going through a harrowing experience, something that we definitely talk about during Lughnasadh season, as hanging on the Yggdrasil world tree for 9 days. He loses an eye. Hey, wait a minute. Didn't we just? I'm sure that's just a coincidence. And he gains his magical wisdom. From Finland, from our Finn Norse friends and our Finn friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Ilmatar, who is a magical princess, and able to do all sorts of cool magical stuff. And from our friends and ancestors from Brittany, we have the Day of Ahis, and Ahis is another magician that rolls in and does a bunch of cool stuff. Um, and yeah, lots of fighting, lots of power, and lots of magic with all of those guys. Almost last but not least, coming back to the Dies Natalis for the Temple of Asclepius from our Roman friends and ancestors, this is sort of the opening of the healer and healing holidays and festivals that we are going to see an abundance of as we move through Virgo season. There is going to be actually a lot of holidays and festivals throughout Virgo season and into Libra season as we step into Mabon, around purifying, cleansing, healing, restoring, bringing back to whole, all of that stuff, which, again, makes a ton of sense when we think about the habits and the rituals, and the detailed attendance to self-care that Virgo season calls for. And that, like, coming back to self and attending to the health rituals that we need as individuals, and. So that's the beginning of that. But last, certainly not least, we have a very interesting festival from our Roman friends and ancestors called the Clavis Annalis. And the Clavis Annalis happens this year on August 29th. It is the 14th or 15th day of the month of September, calende September, because, of course, the month started with the new moon, right? So here's one of those moments where Gregorian calendar versus these ancient calendars, they don't line up exactly, yada, yada, yada. But this is marking the Ides of September, aka the 15th-ish day of the lunar month of September, which is why it's August 29th this year. So what is this? What are we talking about? Well, the Clavis Annalis was the year nail. And this is related to a phrase in Latin that is clavum figere, to nail in, to fasten, or fix the nail. And we're going straight from Wikipedia right now. Goddess bless. So this phrase, clavum figere, was an expression that referred to the fixing or the sealing of fate. A nail was one of the attributes of the goddess Necessitas and of the Etruscan goddess Athropa, or Atropos, is what the Greeks called her, if you are not familiar. Every year in the temple of Nortia or Nortia, the Etruscan counterpart of Fortuna, a nail was driven into something, a wall, whatever, to mark the time. In Rome, on the Ides of September, a senior magistrate would drive a nail called the Clavis Annalis, or year nail, into the wall of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. The ceremony occurred on the Dies Natalis, or the birthday, or the anniversary, or the dedication of the temple. We talked about that before. But the ceremony occurred on the Dies Natalis of the temple, when a banquet for Jupiter, the Epilum Jovis, was also held, which we just talked about a minute ago. The nail driving ceremony, however, took place in a templum devoted to Minerva on the right side of the Hades of Jupiter. The Hades being a type of temple, like it's like a temple uh, wing, side shoot thing. Because the concept of number was invented by Minerva, and the ritual predated the common use of written letters. So, uh, this is a very interesting ritual, and it brings to mind a lot of imagery for me personally. Um, but this was the ritual of driving the nail or fixing the nail or fastening the nail. And think about the deities and the entities that are a part of this: Necessitas, Atropos, Nortia, Fortuna, right? There, that's way more about fortune and fate and how time moves and how time rolls out. So in the form that we see it, or have the best documentation around, we have the Roman version of this, right? So in theory, it's a banquet for Jupiter, Eplum Jovis, but the banquet is actually for Jupiter and Jove and Minerva. So who is Minerva? Well, Minerva is a Roman goddess of, again, straight from Wiki, a Roman goddess of wisdom, justice, law, victory, and a sponsor of the arts, trade, and strategy. Um, she is really kind of an answer to a goddess like Athena. She's sort of a version of Athena. She even has the owl of Minerva, which which symbolized her association with wisdom and knowledge. She is also associated to the snake and the olive tree. Um, and to me, Minerva is a really great connection to Virgo. I feel like these characters are very similar to each other. Now that's a feeling. I'm saying that I feel that way. I'm not saying that's objectively what any source out there would say that these two things are. But but she's, self-owned like Athena is. She's very dedicated to finding the best way through things, right? She's a work smarter, not harder goddess. Um, and and she is also a bit of a prude. Like when we look through some of the myths that she's connected to, she is who causes problems for Arachne because she's pissed off that Arachne can spin better than her or might be able to spin better than her, and weave better than her. She is who causes problems for Medusa because she catches Medusa and Neptune doing whatever they were doing in the temple. Some sources say it was consensual, some sources say it was not consensual, but she punishes Medusa by turning her into a gorgon and the form that we know her as, etc., etc., right? So she's got some stuff going on with her, but she also is connected to this idea of being sort of an embodiment of wisdom, an embodiment of knowledge, an embodiment of understanding. um Marcus Terentius Varro, a Roman polymath and prolific author back in the day, considered her, Minerva, to be ideal and the plan for the universe personified. Now, that to me, in and of itself, is a very trippy thing because we now know, thanks to astronomy, that Mercury, that the Milky Way is a part of something called the Virgo supercluster, which is a part of one of the four main branches of the Laniakea supercluster, which is a collection of about 100,000 other galaxies. Here in the Virgo supercluster, I want to say that it's like 100 or maybe 1,000 um galaxies here in the Virgo portion of it. But anyways, the point is that even then they were looking at Virgo as like the embodiment of the universe, and turns out astronomy was like, yeah, totally. kind of is. um but uh Minerva, embodiment of poetry, medicine, weaving, crafts, wisdom. Okay. And this festival of like nailing the year or fixing the year is dedicated to her to an extent. Um, so go with me on a journey. We have just had Mercury station retrograde in Virgo, Mercury ruling planet. And we're going to talk about this more in the reversals class, but the the word retrograde breaks down to retro and grade, and this is about the backwards movements of planets, or the planets looking to appearing to change direction and move opposite their normal direction. We take the word retro and it means of the past, back there before. But if we break that down, we have re and tro. And tro is the same as intro, it's to go somewhere. So we're going into the past. But re connects us to a lot of stuff. And when we dive down into that word, it connects to the Proto Indo European word wort, which is wort, which is herbs, but it also means fate and to turn and to spin and to unweave and undo. And here is where I think there is a very interesting connection with Minerva being a weaver goddess, having an argument with a weaver goddess, as well as the initial or the foundational version of this holiday coming from the Etruscan folks. We have Atropos, we have Nortia, the counterpart of Fortuna, right? There's something here way more about sealing our fate. And fixing our fate in place, like picking what our fate is going to be and then pinning it down. There's also something here about the nail sort of being the center of things and everything moving around that center. And again, that would really fix the circumference, wouldn't it? Right? Like, how big is the circle? Where did we put the center? Where did we put the nail? That's going to tell us how big this situation could get. I know that that's not that's what I've got. And what I was about to say is, I know that that's not like a straightforward thing. It's kind of a pile of stuff for you to think about. But hey, that's our moon. That's our waxing half moon in Sagittarius. Here's a bunch of weird philosophical and spiritual stuff to think about. Enjoy, ponder at your will and leisure. Um, but this stuff with the clavis analyst, the nail of the year, and fixing the year in place, to me is very interesting. At one point, uh, the Jewish New Year would have more or less always lined up with on the same day or within a day or two of this holiday, or within 2 weeks of it. And it's very close to the Egyptian New Year. It's very close to the Coptic New Year. It's very close to the Persian New Year. So the Zoroastrian New Year. So there's a lot of like, right? We know we have New Years all throughout the year. The year is constantly starting and constantly ending, but here is one of those places where a bunch of that stuff lines up. So maybe something really interesting to explore or investigate for you. Maybe just something interesting to ponder. But I kind of had to go off on that because it really delighted me, and I just thought it was a super interesting thing. Um, the nail of the year. Okay. So that, my friends, brings us to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for being here with me. Appreciate you. Um, Questions, comments, out loud processing, send me an email through my website. Send me an email, I think maybe even through the podcast. You can send a mail. You can send a message. Oh wait, no, we're not quite dead. We have a little bit more to go. That's right. I almost forgot, but here we are. We got it. Our tarot that I am encouraging us to work with this week are the Hermit and the Magician cards. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. um, But yeah, these are the cards that I absolutely encourage us to work with this week. Work with them in whatever way you want. You might just have the cards set out on your altar. You might do some visualization with them. You might have a conversation with the card. You really can kind of practice that and work with that in whatever way you want. For our witchcraft this week, I am encouraging feasting with friends and family, especially as we line up towards the full moon. This is a great week for saving seeds, a great week for climbing a hill, and a great week for engaging in whatever Virgo stuff makes sense for you: cleaning, organizing, moving furniture because the heaters are going to be coming on soon, all of that stuff. Uh, for our journal prompts, I've got a couple of things for you to think about and then, you know, journal on what that stuff brings up for you. Thank you, calendar. Do not say, I follow the one true path of the Spirit, but rather, I have found the Spirit while walking my path, for the Spirit walks on all paths. That's from Khalil Gibran. And the other thing I would give you to think about and journal on if anything comes up for you is a quote from Mark Twain. The work that is really a person's own work is play and not work at all. What's that stuff bring up for you? There's a couple of more suggestions for patrons. You'll find them in the notes. Not going to go over everything. But that's everything. That's our stuff. In our astrology, it's so super simple. It's almost too little to mention, but here I will one more time. August 24th, we have our waxing half moon at 1 degree of Sagittarius, and we have Mars in Venus trine Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 28 degrees. Friday, nothing. Saturday, the 26th, the moon moves into Capricorn. Sunday, the 27th, we have our gibbous moon at 19 degrees of Capricorn. We also have the sun in Virgo oppose Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 3 degrees, and Mars moving into Libra. And Monday, the 28th, we have the moon moving into Aquarius, and we have Uranus stationing retrograde in Taurus at 23 degrees. Okay. So this is a week of lots of mixed energies. It's also a week where there's not a lot of stuff going on, which I think is a blessing. So sit with the work that comes up for you, take care of yourself, drink some water, go slow, and allow that uncomfortable work to come for you a little bit. Because we do have a little moment right now to kind of take a breath and get our stuff organized. So if tough astrology is happening for you right now, give yourself the room and the permission to sit with it and be a little affected by it or a lot affected by it. And work through it. And if this is a week where things are super duper chill, enjoy, dog. Enjoy. You're welcome. I mean, I didn't do it. I'm just bearing the news. That's it. Don't thank me. Don't blame me. All right, my witches, my heathens, pagans, that's what's up for this week. Blessed be.